This is Tyrese Haliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
All right, everybody, we have made it. It is the final episode of the mailbag where you guys send in 30 questions. I think one of the episodes had 6 questions. This one will only have 4. So if it's not super lengthy, there might be some other stuff added here at the end, maybe some NBA news dump, that kind of thing. But gonna start things off here, Facci, with Ben at BViddy72. He said, I think I asked you about how Facci came to be a Pacers fan growing up on the East Coast and how you guys got connected to create the podcast a while back, but I may not have listened if you guys ever addressed that. So can you please, Facci, share how all that happened?
Absolutely. So look, I grew up and still live in New York. My parents never really cared about sports. My brother is like such a fake basketball fan. Like he likes the Knicks when the Knicks are good. If the Knicks aren't good, he doesn't talk about basketball for years. So look, my theory is I leaned into the so-called enemy at the time, which was the Indiana Pacers, because the Pacers Knicks, that rivalry in the late 90s. That's truly my first basketball memories. And Reggie Miller was the guy that got me hooked. Jermaine O'Neal is the guy who got me obsessed with this team. So I've been with this team for ever since I was super young. So I'm 32 now. I mean, we're going on well over 20 years. But as it relates to the podcast and meeting Alex, well, I'll share my side. You share yours. See if I missed anything. Look, I remember I must have been following Alex on Twitter or seen a tweet from his, and I remember he said, anyone interested in doing a Pacers podcast? And I thought to myself, I don't even know another Pacer fan. So this is probably my shot. Because growing up in New York, I was looked at, oh, you're a Pacer fan? How did that happen? Like I hear that all the time. I still hear it. So I was like, I gotta jump on this opportunity. I was on sports radio in college for West Virginia. I covered some of the athletics. I always loved podcasts. I always wanted to do a podcast. Never had anyone to do it with. So I just messaged Alex. I was like, "Hey, I'll do the podcast. I'll take a shot." And it wasn't big time in me or anything. He was like, "All right, well, I'll see what you got." Like, probably testing the waters. Like, what do you know or anything like that. I can't remember the name of your show at the time. Do you remember what it was?
I think it was Let's Talk Pacers.
Maybe it was Let's Talk Pacers. Yeah, it
Yeah.
might have been that. I know you've had a couple different names for shows over the
Yeah.
years. And we did an episode. I remember it was like it was like a Saturday morning episode. And I remember I was like, this is my shot to prove myself. Like I put together a lot of notes. I was like, I'm going to come ready. And afterwards, I felt like it was like one of those, like, you're like, yeah, you did good. Like, yeah, you know your stuff. Like, I was like, all right, any tips? She's like, yeah, maybe you should start writing or anything like that. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. You and I, we started the 5x5, which included 3 other guys. We were writing articles. We were doing podcasts. I don't know how long those other 3 guys lasted with us. It felt like it probably wasn't that long.
Oh.
But then eventually we were just like, all right, you know what? Let's do something that's strictly Pacers. You, me, Tyler Smith came up with Setting the Pace. I don't remember how many episodes Tyler lasted. I don't know if he made a full year or not. Maybe he did like 25 episodes or so, maybe less.
Yeah.
But my version, what's yours?
Pretty spot on. The 5x5 was interesting. So for me specifically, I just grew up in Indiana. I love local radio. Michael Grady, Big Joe Stasiak. They had a show that I loved. I listened to it every morning as a driver for my company, and I would just like constantly want to be in their conversations. Like even in high school and college, like, I would tune in to the radio show to listen to what they had to say about the Paul George playoff stuff. I just wanted to hear what they had to say, and I was just constantly like tweeting at Grady. David Deering was the producer, and I'm just constantly like just being that annoying fan that's messaging them all the time. And Grady was gracious enough, to reply every once in a while or read my tweets on the air. But it was one of those things where it didn't happen super often. So I was basically being like a big fan, and I just loved it. And then all of a sudden, I think they're still around. It's called The Grueling Truth. I think Mike Goodpaster is like the creator of that, and he reached out to me about doing some Pacers stuff for their website. He had saw my, whatever that I had been doing. And so I put my podcast out there and I did this website with him, like writing and doing like NBA stuff for him. And I was really getting into it. But then I was like, I'm just wanting to focus on the Pacers. Like the NBA stuff is a lot of work. I was doing like a Let's Talk NBA show and Let's Talk Pacers for The Grueling Truth. They also had me on NFL shows and stuff like that. Like they were really using me because they liked me as a podcaster. And I felt like, okay, I've got something here. Maybe I've got something where this can, work out. So I was like, I just want to do Pacers though. I want to get a co-host so it can be a little bit easier. And like Facci said, I put the prompt out there. Hey, anybody want to come on? And it wasn't like me big timing Facci. I just want to make sure the chemistry was going to work. I didn't want to commit with somebody and be like, yeah, I'm not feeling this. And Tyler was coaching girls basketball at the time. So it was very difficult for us to just find that schedule where we could do it consistently. And then when me and Facci decided to pick up more time on the podcast, besides like once a week, we were doing it once a week, guys, back in the day. And then I remember when we went to 3 days a week, Facci was like, whoa, this is a lot, man. I'm used to the 1 day a week. And I was doing Mondays without him with Kent Sterling. And then Facci had his Facci Fridays. So we had a thing going. We would meet up on Wednesdays, be the only time we talk. And then when I eventually said, let's do daily, Facci's like, bro, okay. If you think so, I'm like, I just think we got to be more consistent, more at the times and stuff like that. So it's more of just trying to progress as a podcast, but it's been a lot of fun. I will say this, like for me and Facci, how we met, it's just basically through social media. You just never know who you're going to meet. And people always ask me like, your co-host, like they still ask me, your co-host is from New York. And I'm like, yeah,
all the time.
So it is pretty interesting. Sometimes I do have regrets because I'm always stuck with Facci now for the rest of my life. No, I'm kidding.
True.
But I'm kidding. But it is one of those things where I feel like, we've developed good chemistry over time, and there's been some ups and downs. Facci and me get into it. I tease Facci a little too much sometimes, and he can't handle it. So I've had to calm down on my Wizards jokes and things like that. If you guys have noticed, I don't want to upset the fruit basket. You got Papa Bear over here, not getting much sleep being a dad. So I just kept poking the bear a little bit too much, which I can do. So that's part of me maturing as well. Like, I think that we both have matured so much, and we were talking about it this week, just like, I'm going to be a dad in December. And so like, he knows what it's like to make that transition. And I think that our lives are just changing right now in front of us. And so the podcast, we're just going to keep it going and see how it goes. It might not be as frequent as it has been. We'll figure it out, but we're going to keep it going for as long as we can. I don't think there's any sign of us stopping anytime soon. So, we love the Pacers. We love you guys. It's been a blast to see this thing grow. And, other than that, yeah, like if I ever stop doing this podcast, I don't know how Facci's going to carry it on, because I do all the producing and everything else behind it. So it's just one of those things where it's we've got a good relationship where we're able to work together, and if there's episodes we can't make it, we just find someone to fill in and just keep the show moving. That's how we always feel, and I think that you guys appreciate that, because we try to give you as much content as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, our lives have changed drastically from when this show first started. I remember it was like, you got married like right in the beginning of the show or something, right before
the week
the
of
show.
my wedding is when we started the podcast.
Like literally, yeah, like that happened. I don't even think I even had a girlfriend at the time. Then eventually it's like I met my wife, we got married, had a baby, you're having a baby. This past year was hands down the hardest year of my life. It was the biggest transition I've ever gone through. There's no way to prepare yourself for being a father. Like, you can listen to anyone who's going to give you advice. It means nothing until you're in the moment. And we have just always tried to just work with the schedule that we got. If someone absolutely can't make it, just try and have the show go on and everything. And it's just, we've always tried to give you guys as much as we possibly can as it relates to also working 9 to 5 jobs and things like that. Like, it's not easy, but like, we both love this team so much. And when we get questions like this and people that are like, hey, like, appreciate you guys' hard work, it's like, that's what makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
Because there's been so many late nights after heartbreaking losses where the last thing you want to do is record, but that there's going to be someone the next day that wants to hear what happened last night, and that's just like what keeps us going. So we've always said it, I'll say it again, we got the best listeners in the game. That's the only reason why this show is approaching 950 episodes next month. And that is pretty crazy for a lot of podcasts that put out a couple episodes and then quit. So I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, to think that we've outlasted JJ Redick's 3 podcast attempts, I think that's pretty impressive.
It really is. I mean,
All right. Well, we got 3 more questions here to answer on today's show, Facci. So go ahead and give us the next one.
Next, simply known as actually, nope, never mind. So this is Samuelpippo. Said, guys, should Tyrese be having more of a I score first than assist first mentality? Last year, he was making plays to uplift every other player. in the game, given they're almost maximizing their game. I see only Tyrese putting his points to 28 and having 8 assists better for the team.
I mean, Tyrese is not going to be the guy that's going to score 28 points on a regular basis. I think at the beginning of the season, he was shooting lights out and was playing at like an all NBA level, like top 5 in the league at some point, especially that end season tournament run, like he was playing out of this world, but they kind of needed him to, especially with the way they were playing defense and offense. So Tyrese is just one of those guys where he's just pass first, and he always talks about that internal battle of like shooting versus not shooting. And he was getting ripped during the playoff run. Every time he didn't shoot the ball enough and the team was struggling, it's like, where's Tyrese Haliburton? You're the franchise guy. You got to take these shots. Like, he's not a Reggie Miller kind of guy where Reggie Miller would go, 3 of 18 one night, just trying to do whatever he could to will his team to, a win. And even if he wasn't hitting shots, he would just take them, where Tyrese is not that guy that's not just going to chuck. And he kind of has a good feel for the game, so I trust his intuition with everything. But I think that he just needs to find a better balance of it. I don't think it needs to be more of score first versus not. I just think when there's times when he needs to score more, he needs to do it. We saw a little bit in the playoffs when he finally did it. I just wish he would do it a little bit more consistently of, okay, other guys don't have it tonight, I got to step up and be more of a scorer. But when other guys do have it, let me be more of a facilitator and get my 18 points this game in the flow of the game without trying to force it. But let me get 18 assists as well, because I'm just feeding everybody the ball. So I think there's just got to be a good balance there, Facci.
Yeah, I think first, Samuel, let's get you some spell check on that tweet. That was a hard one to read. I mean, I was trying to figure that out on the fly.
We love our listeners. Sam, that tweet was terrible. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, no, I appreciate you. Anyone who submits any questions, thank you for taking the time. But I just
jerk.
that was a hard one to read. I was like, what is he saying here? But look, Samuel, here's what I'm saying. I disagree, because I think he's hands down maybe the best floor general in the league right now. His pass first mentality is what makes him as good as he is, and is the sole reason why he's on Team USA. I think in a perfect world, it'd be awesome if he could get to like 25 points per game and like 10 or 11 assists. I honestly really do think that he has that in him. I think to start last year, there was a couple months where he was averaging like 28 points per game, and then it was a little bit down from there. So like I think 25 and 10, 25 and 11 is definitely in his future. But I think that he also has to be more aggressive than what we saw in the second half of the year, where he had back-to-back months where he averaged like 17 points per game and 9 assists. He's too good to average 17, and he's way too good to have games where he has 6 shots. That can't happen anymore. So like you said, balance is really important. Like, he needs to be averaging at least 20 points per game at any given time. But his assists, his ball movement, his wanting to get his team going so they have the confidence is what makes him so special. So it's like, if Tyrese is only having, we look at this, if Tyrese has 7 or 8 assists, like, the team's not really winning many games.
Yeah.
It's when Tyrese has like 12, 15 assists. That's when like I feel really good that the Pacers probably shot well over 50% from the field. Everybody's eating, they're all producing, and I feel like, give me the Tyrese that can average, say, 22 and 12. That's probably more straight up in the middle. That would be the best for the team.
Yeah, and get better shooting percentages again. Get closer to 50, 40, 90. That's what I care more about, as being efficient and being productive than anything. So, but good question, Samuel. I appreciate that. Let's move on to Adam here at Reds Fan Rip 19. He said, do you think this team can really win a championship next season? I know they made a huge jump last season. Just curious if you think they have a legit shot next season with nearly everyone back.
Of course, I'm set up to answer this one first. I'm going to say that I don't think they can win a championship next year.
Breaking hearts.
I know, I am. Like, what
is this?
I can't
Where's
be
the
that
faith?
guy. I know, but I want to be like, yes, we could do this. But like, here's the thing: everybody around us got better, and I think no one wants to hear it, but everybody's got to kind of admit it. To an extent, the Pacers did benefit from teams being hurt last year.
No, they didn't.
I mean, look, it's like we played really good, but if the league's healthy, like the East got better. The Knicks got better. The 76ers got better. Boston they're just as good. They didn't lose anybody.
Yeah.
So they look really good. I think for the Pacers, you're banking on that internal development. Guys like Mathurin, Nembhard, Nesmith, Obi, Jarris, like Haliburton, can they take a step forward? next year and continue to get better. They're all young enough where I feel like they can. But and then you can make the argument. Look, Pascal Siakam, his first full season as a Pacer. If Tyrese Haliburton can be healthy, Indiana should be a better team. But is that like better in the regular season seed wise? Like maybe instead of the 6th seed, they're like the 3rd or the 4th. Maybe. Does that translate to getting you out of the conference finals into the NBA finals? I don't know if it does. So I don't think you should expect an NBA title next season if you're a Pacer fan.
Yeah, I'll just say this. Indiana making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, it's deserved. They earned it. I know there was injuries to other teams, and yeah, that did help them, but they still earned getting there.
It did.
They're ahead of schedule.
Yes.
They would not surprise me. Okay, here's what I'll say. It would not surprise me if they made it back to the Eastern Conference Finals, but it also would not surprise me if they got eliminated in round 1. That's just where I'm at with this team. I think that the East has gotten better. I think that this team has a limit to what they can get to. And I think that, New York, nobody wants to hear it, but they got better. Obviously, Boston brought everybody back. They're already better. I think that Milwaukee probably got a little bit better with the moves they made, even though they lost a few people. But, I just think Gary Trent Jr. is probably a better upgrade of the players. Like, losing Pat Beverly will hurt defensively, but, still, Damian Lillard getting healthy, Giannis getting healthy. Middleton having double, what was it, wrist injuries or something like that?
Yeah.
Ankle injury, double ankle injury?
It is ankle injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a little nerve wracking. And Brook Lopez is a year older, but still, they still have Giannis, and he's going to be healthy, and they're going to have a better team, I think. Philadelphia got better, so it's if the Pacers and I think Orlando got better as well. So it's if Indiana just cannot win a first round series against some of those teams, it's not because they're not good. It's just because the other teams are good too. So, and other teams are going to take a step forward. It's not, I think the league is really deep right now. So people always want to talk about the Western Conference, but the Eastern Conference, that top 8, I think anybody could be anybody pretty much besides Boston. I mean, I would pick Boston to make it back to the championship again, just because they're so loaded up front. That's why they're paying everybody $40 million plus. So that's where I'm at. I don't want to be too much of a homer and say, yeah, we can get back there. But it does seem a little bit like fool's gold for what happened. But they do stay healthy, and they do play a style that's very hard to guard. And I think they can compete with the best of the best. And that's why I said I wouldn't be surprised one way or the other if they could get back to the Eastern Conference Finals. I just don't see them winning an NBA championship next year.
I don't either. I wish I did, but I think the Pacers they jumped the gun so much. I think that you should say coming into this year, I expect to win a playoff series, and even that's really hard to even say because in the first round you could very well draw any of the teams that you just mentioned. It is really possible to be a 4-5 matchup and play the Knicks in round 1, and you're like, whoa, that's a really hard first round matchup. You could play the healthy Bucks. That's a really hard first round matchup. And same with anyone else. Orlando is also banking on internal development, but adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was a really big signing. It really was. That's something they were already in a top-notch defensive team, being as young as they were. You had KCP there, they're going to be better. So I think that Indiana has their work cut out for them. I'd like to see what they do at the deadline. Any of those teams that we just made could very well be making moves to get even better at the trade deadline as well. Look what the Knicks did. They traded for OG at the deadline. It's just, those type of moves happen. So we'll see what happens with Indiana. But yeah, I don't feel confident enough to say we're winning a championship. But the last question that we got, B. Razi on Twitter, he's at Billy O's, said, what defensive scheme do you feel is most important for this lineup? Is the offensive scheme the reason for why our defense has been so hard to improve? You notice the D got a lot better in the playoffs when they focused more on half-court actions offensively?
Yeah, I think that they just need to bring Dan Burke back, right? I mean, that's obvious. I'm just kidding. That's what everybody says on Twitter. I'm being facetious. But no, I think defensively, everyone just has to lock in and play team defense. And yeah, you can say, okay, how do they do in blitzing pick and roll here when the player is going off? Or what do they do on switches? Are they going to drop coverage more often or not? Every team that they're playing is going to be a different scheme that they play. I think they're going to adjust to the team that they're playing against. I would like to see them kind of utilize zone a little bit more every once in a while, just to see if they could throw some wrinkles in there, because we've seen how zone can affect Indiana at times when teams go from a man to a zone. And I think they have done that throughout the season at different times, but it's just not been executed perfectly. But I think that they have the players that they can kind of switch. You got Neesmith, Nembhard, and Siakam. You probably feel good about switching that. You want to try to hide Haliburton at all costs because he's just such a bad defender. It's why he really can't get a lot of playing time with Team USA. And then Turner, you feel pretty good about kind of funneling things to him. So if they could do a better job of, funneling to him more and not relying so much on like guarding and opening space for him, I think that would be a benefit for him. Same with a guy like Isaiah Jackson, who's a great rim protector, but like we even saw Isaiah Jackson blocking jump shots like Jason Tatum's jump shot in the playoffs. Like he can guard out in space. They just got to make sure that they do a good job of limiting how much time that they are out there, like their bigs on guards. Like you don't want to have that come up. So I just think playing your man-to-man, play basic man-to-man defense. Obviously, you're going to have to like call out screens. There's a lot of pick and roll basketball, dribble handoff stuff. Switch when it's appropriate, but don't just be so lazy that you switch everything. I think that can be kind of some bad defensive scheme. So fight through the screens, fight through the picks, really like just continue to just figure things out. But it really just comes down to like, can they dig their heels in and play better defense? And I think when it mattered the most, they did. Not that it was great, but it was better. Right now, regular season, it's just establishing a culture of, okay, we got to take this more seriously.
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly. I think you went to good detail on that. I don't think there's anything really that I would add to that. I think that we saw this team get better defensively as the season went on. They were the worst defensive unit for the first month or two and just steadily got better. I think they definitely were a very solid middle of the pack defensive team once Pascal Siakam joined. And I also think that there's no reason to think that why can't the Pacers be a top 15 to 20 defensive unit next year, just throughout the season, not starting at the worst and then finishing there, just being throughout. And I think at that point, that's awesome. That's everything you can ask for or hope when you have an incredibly elite offense. I do think at times when the Pacers were scoring, 150 points per game on certain nights, I think they were probably not really focusing too much on defense, just going up and down the court and giving up 145, or in certain instances to the Hawks, you might have been giving up about 155, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. But I think that we saw enough defensive improvement as the season went on for me to believe that they could be a middle of the pack unit. And last year coming into the season, there was actually no faith that they could be that. I mean, even when Chad Buchanan came on, I think he was striving for, could they be a top 20 defensive unit? That was coming into last year, and it's like they were so well below that I think that now we're finally hitting that point where they could be, and that seems good enough for what the Pacers can do based on the type of offense that they play.
Yeah, I completely agree. So there we go. That is the Mailbag podcast wrap up there, everybody. That is the last one of the 6 episodes. So thank you all so much for tuning in. And Facci, we know everybody knows where to follow us, but if this is your first time listening, please let everybody know where they can find us at on social.
Absolutely. So you can find us on Twitter at PacersPod, STP. You can find Alex on Twitter at AlexGoldenNBA. I can be found on Twitter at _FACCI. You can find us on Instagram at PacersPod, STP. You can find us on Facebook at Setting the Pace. You can find us on TikTok at Setting the Pace. And Alex, tell them where they can check us out on YouTube.
Ladies and gentlemen, go to youtube.com/Setting the Pace, a Pacers podcast. We can find all of our video content. Thank you all so much for once again tuning in to another episode here. We do appreciate it. Please leave us a 5-star rating and review on the audio platforms, wherever you get this podcast. But if you're excited that the Pacers have some new guys to look at here in a couple of weeks for training camp with James Wiseman on the roster, who we talked about in episode 1, hit me with those 3 words.
Let's go, Pacers!